Good morning to all of you. A rather nice and simple class today as we are reading a nice little text by Diderot. A nice change from the rather large, complex, but very wonderful text to read by Rousseau in the Creed of the Savoyard priest. So here again we'll choose a few passages that seem interesting. So the class today, I think, will be rather short. We have time to do Diderot quickly. And then we will move on next week. So next week will be dedicated to Kant. We are today the 24th, so I think the 29th of April and the 1st of May, if there is class, I'm not sure if we'll have the first off. But at least the next Wednesday we will deal with Kant. Hopefully we can also do Kant in one sitting, in one class. We will see. If not, we'll develop more. Diderot. Diderot is, of course, one of the big figures of the Enlightenment, as many of you might know. He's known, of course, for the creation, along with D'Alembert, of the encyclopedia, the first important, at least, encyclopedia, which included all the arts, all the craftsmanship, everything they could get their hands on, and with actually, since we were reading him, some contributions also from Rousseau. Rousseau studied at the University of Dijon, my university, musicology. So some of the work cited, some of the entries actually in the encyclopedia are by Rousseau on music. Anyways, Diderot is then an encyclopedist. He is close to many figures, many mathematicians, many philosophers, physicists, and so on. He has a very open outlook. Diderot is also what we consider part of the more radical Enlightenment, if you like. He oscillates between the two, the moderate Enlightenment and the radical Enlightenment, the radical that becomes practically atheistic, and the moderate that goes for deism more and for the argument from design. So this is Diderot. Diderot then leaves a lot of work, and some of his writings approach the idea of the religious, the idea of God, of course, and here we have some of his views on the question. So I'm not going to read everything to you. We're going to choose what is most important. So please open with me on page 116. I think we still have the same pages. 116. And I imagine you can read in Roman numerals, right? So we will look at section 10 or paragraph 10. X. One of the things he says here about God to start is God must be imagined, pardon me, as neither too kind nor too cruel. Justice, so we can see here there's a link between God and justice. If we are to imagine a God, if we are to say that there is a God, we have to link him to justice. What is justice? Justice is the mean. It means, in statistical terms, the mean is not like the mode and the normal average. The mean in that sense, the average, if you like. Justice is the mean between clemency, to forgive everything, and cruelty, right? So this is a kind of heritage of Aristotle, right? Because for Aristotle, if you remember from our readings, any kind of virtue, including justice, would have to be a mean, right? So if I'm generous, if you remember what we said, generous is the mean between profligacy, tabzir, and avarice, al-bukhl. And very often we're talking about a mean, not a middle. The mean can be closer sometimes to one pole than the other. Anyways, justice, I would say personally, is of course closer to clemency. So justice is the mean between clemency and cruelty. Just as finite penalties are the mean between impunity and eternal punishment. Okay, so if we are to imagine a God, we have to imagine him as just for Diderot always, and it means not that he is just clement and forgives everyone, and not that he is just a cruel God, as we do find in some of the pagan gods. So, one determination. "11. I am aware," Diderot says, we are on page 117 now, which is 31 in the book of Philosophic Thoughts. So 11. "I am aware that the somber, dark ideas of superstition, al-khurafat wama ila dhalik, of superstition are more generally approved of than accepted. That there are pietists, taqwa, piety, al-taqi, pietist. So there are pietists who do not think it necessary to hate themselves in order to love God, of course, or to live as desperate wretches, miserable people, in order to be religious. Their devotion is positive, they are happy to be devoted. Their wisdom very human. So of course then some of the pietists are not necessarily hating themselves and so on. They can be happy and show happiness. But he asks, Diderot, where from? Whence? Whence means from where. But whence comes this difference in sentiment between people who prostrate themselves before the same altars? Can piety thus be subject to the law of temperament? Alas, it must be so. Its influence is only too apparent in the same devotee. He sees in accordance with its variations a jealous or a merciful God, and hell or heaven opening before him. He trembles with fear or burns with love. It is a fever with its hot and cold fits. So he says, okay, some people can be pious, but he notices that there is an excess in piety, which of course Diderot rejects. Some people just go insane, in fact, because they have such a temperament, طبعا. So they let their temperament take over. So it's not a question of God wants this or God's justice requires it. No, it is people who are like this. They are overly enthusiastic, and over enthusiasm mixed with superstition, you can imagine the results. So they are overly expressive. And he describes this, for Diderot, this is very bad. Somebody who goes to mosque or church or whatever and cries and expresses too much his emotions toward God, for him this is too much, this enthusiasm. He describes it as, when you read it, he describes it as a disease, right? He says, this person at the end, he trembles with fear or burns with love. It is a fever, right? Like it's as if you had a flu. It's a fever with its hot and cold fits. So of course, this is bad. So it is of course the fruit of superstition, thinking that if you express so many emotions, you cry and you worry and you are afraid so much of God and you love God so much, the opposite, and cry and or laugh or whatever, that somehow God will love you more. This is superstition. And the next paragraph tells us, 12, yes, says Diderot, I maintain that superstition is more of an insult to God than atheism. I would rather, said Plutarch, that people thought that Plutarch never existed than they thought of Plutarch as unjust, choleric, inconstant, jealous, and revengeful, and such as he would be sorry to be. So, very big statement here for our dear friend Diderot. He says, it is worse, in fact, to be superstitious like this, to think that God is involved in so many minute things, that God would listen to you if you cry, that God would, etc., etc. This is more of an insult to God than someone who doesn't believe in God. Because someone who does this thinks that they have certain power also over God, that they can get him to do what they want through supplications and so on. So it is kind of insult to God. God doesn't require such things for Diderot. God isn't a God that wants you to have horrible fears. He doesn't want you to have horrible superstitions about him, or to think that if you have so much devotion, he will do what you want. No. This is an insult for him to God. God cannot be functioning like this, like the whims of the humans. So, this is why he says it's more of an insult to him than actual atheism. Okay. We can go to 15, please. So we are on page 118. Diderot says, I tell you that there is no God. He's quoting, He's quoting, I tell you that there is no God, that creation is a fiction. This is what the atheist would say. That the eternity of the universe is no more of a difficulty than the eternity of spirit. So who would say that? Of course, the atheist. Diderot continues, that because I do not see how motion could have caused this universe, though it keeps it going, it is ridiculous to solve the difficulty by supposing the existence of a being of whom I can have no real conception. That if the wonders of the physical universe show more intelligence, the confusions in the moral order are the negations of a providence. I tell you, if everything is the work of a God, everything should be the best possible. For if everything is not the best possible, it is impotence or malevolence on the part of God. Therefore, it is fortunate that I am not better informed as to his existence. If it were proved satisfactorily, and it is by no means proved, that all evil is the source of good, that it was for the best that Britannicus, the best of princes, perished, and that Nero, the worst of men, should reign, how is it possible to prove that it was impossible to attain the same ends without using such means? To allow vice in order to throw virtue into relief is a poor advantage in comparison with its real disadvantage. That, says the atheist, is my case. Okay? So Diderot exposed to us why the atheist is an atheist. And he says, how can we answer him? What have you to say to it? That I am a miserable wretch, and that if I had nothing to fear from God, I should not be disputing his existence. Let us leave such an answer to orators. It may be untrue. Politeness forbids it, and it has no savor of charity about it. Because a man is mistaken in his denial of God, should we insult him? People only take refuge in invective when they run short of proofs. Of two engaged in argument, it is 100 to 1 that the man in the wrong will become angry. You thunder instead of answering, says Menippus to Jupiter. Are you then in the wrong? All right. What is Diderot here saying? If I am to be very simple, I can say that Diderot is telling us we should not attack the atheists with violence, right? In other words, we should not just simply not listen to the atheists. We should not tell them that they are just horrible people not believing in God. This is not the way to go about it. So, and in fact, he tells us people who get angry in arguments are usually people who have no good argument. Think of it, many people on television who have no good argument against another in front of them, sort of at the end get angry. So the fact that we could get angry about someone sitting and rationally trying to talk about something with us and to reason with us is proof that we have no proof. It's proof that we are without any defense. So he's saying, no, we should instead listen to the atheist, see what he has to say, and then answer him. If we are deists, of course, we would answer from the argument of design of the universe. We would say, just like a watch, if I look at it, needs a designer, even more a universe that is well ordered would need a designer. Or we can say, if I take one of the things, one of the other examples we can take from, if you remember Hume, of course, you cannot take all the letters in the world, throw them, and somehow you get a book like Al-Mutanabbi's poems, for example. His case was Virgil's Aeneid, of course. So you have to reason with the atheist. Now, what is the atheist argument here? He says it's a moral argument. He says it's an argument against actually Leibniz, to be honest. Leibniz says, Leibniz, that we live in the best possible world, rationally. He says that God, this is Leibniz again, God is the most rational being and the most logical being. So God had in front of him a representation, a possibility that is infinite. So an infinite number of possible worlds. And since he's perfect, he can only bring the best. So if he had created a world that is less good than what he could have created, so if there is a possible world that is better than ours, then God didn't create the best possible world, which is impossible for Leibniz. God created the best possible world. So how does he explain the presence of evil? He takes the example in the discourse on metaphysics. He takes the example of a painting. The best painting, he says, it's not the one that shows just colors and objects. Imagine a painting without shadows. If on a painting you have a chair, a table, this would not be the best possible painting. It would be a horrible painting, in fact. So you need shadows. So in the world, we need what is dark and what is light. We need good and evil. The best possible world is not only a world of good, in which case there would be no reason for there to be good. The good is there in opposition to evil, in contrast to evil. So in the best possible world, we have, for Leibniz, the best proportion of good and evil. Now, sometimes we are very close to what's happening because in a short period of time, because this is how we live. Let's live 70 years, 90 years. We might live in a country that's very poor and we see many bad things happen to us. He says, Leibniz says, this is like being very close to a picture and you only see the shadow, you don't see the bigger picture. So you have to step back in order to see the bigger picture, then you realize. And this is, of course, God's point of view. Only God's point of view would be the perfect one and knows that this is the best possible world. Now, to come back to Diderot, the atheist would attack Leibniz here. He says, no, this is not possible. When we see really the moral order about us, around us, we cannot accept what Leibniz says, that we are always in the best possible world. We see so much evil that it is just impossible to keep this point of view. The father of modern optimism, by the way, is Leibniz. It's optimism. Those of you who were in French schools probably read Voltaire, Candide. In Candide, you have a man called Pangloss. Pangloss in Greek, it means he who explains everything logically. Pangloss is Leibniz. So Voltaire attacks Leibniz. Candide, who's walking with Pangloss everywhere, just ask him questions. Every time he sees something, he sees people suffering, he sees someone die, etc. And he's sad, he's wondering why God allows this. And Pangloss tells him, no, this is normal. We are in the best possible world. This is normal in the best possible world. So he's making fun of how Leibniz says always we are in the best possible world. The atheist is the same. He says we cannot ignore all the suffering. And we cannot say that God uses bad people, like the examples of Nero. Nero was a horrible emperor, and Britannicus was a good person. Why would Britannicus die and Nero live? And Nero burns the whole city and everyone in it dies. Most of people die. We cannot say that God is all powerful in that case, because God, if he were all powerful, he would get to his ends without allowing so much evil, without allowing someone like Nero to burn the whole city of Rome and so on. So this is a moral argument on the part of atheists. And Diderot says we have to listen to that. They have perhaps a point. We have to think about it. Diderot, in other words, is on the side of skepticism. Diderot is not exactly an atheist. He's on the verge. He goes in and out of it. Perhaps one of the great things to read by him is a novel called Jacques le Fataliste, Jack the Fatalist. It's very, very, very much where you see his views and where you see him doubt. He doesn't know. He doesn't know why there is suffering. He doesn't know how to explain it exactly. And he doesn't want to go just into pure atheism. Anyways, we move on. And we have, speaking of atheists, a classification here by Diderot. Please go to page 121, paragraph 22. So the first one. Diderot says, I divide atheists into three classes. There are some who tell you openly there is no God and are convinced of this. These are genuine atheists. Okay? First class, the genuine atheists. There is a fairly large number of people who do not know what to think and would be glad to decide the question by tossing up, like throwing a coin, by tossing up. These are skeptical atheists, right? They do not know what to think. They are not sure. And a still larger number who wish there were no God and who pretend to be convinced of his non-existence and live in harmony with this conviction. These are the braggadocios, those who are braggarts, يعني بفنصو, okay, تفنيس, braggadocios of the party. So we have the genuine atheists, the skeptical atheists, and those who just hate the idea that there is a God, and so they say there is no God even though they're not quite convinced. They are the braggadocios of the party. Of course, the third class he hates. I detest braggarts. They are dishonest. I pity genuine atheists, the first ones, because for them there is no consolation. All consolation is dead to them. And I pray God for the skeptics. They lack knowledge. We wonder where Diderot is amongst all these three. All right. Again, then the braggadocios, those who, again, they are almost like the pious people who don't think sometimes. So he doesn't like them because they brag about something that they cannot defend. The world, by the way, especially among atheists, is full of them. I know lots in France and elsewhere. The genuine atheist, of course, doesn't have a savior. He doesn't think. This is why he says, I pity him. So you cannot console them and say, the world is horrible now, but there is going to be a better world afterwards, or there's a recompense in another world. Okay. As for the skeptics, because they don't quite know, he prays God to help them. They don't have the right knowledge to make the right decision. Okay. Let's go to 24. Careful here, he didn't give us his own point. I would place him on the side of skepticism despite everything. 24, page 122. Skepticism does not suit everybody. Okay? So the skeptical, it supposes a profound and careful examination. So unlike the braggadocios, right? The skeptics actually study very carefully the texts, the proofs. He who doubts, I continue, because he is not acquainted with the grounds of credibility, is no better than an ignoramus. Okay? So if you just doubt without knowing why you doubt, without having any reason, Of course, this is just like an ignorant person who's totally impossible to believe. Now, what is a true skeptic then? A true skeptic has counted and weighed his reasons. Okay? Which, of course, Hume, for example, the great skeptic. Books and books. But it is no easy matter, he says, to weigh arguments. It's difficult to be a skeptic. It's difficult to look at all the arguments and weigh them. Which of us knows their value with any exactness? Out of 100 proofs of the same truth, each one will have its partisans. Every mind, this is a beautiful expression, learn it. Every mind has its own telescope. An objection which is invisible to me is immense, is a colossus to my eyes. Okay? So there is here something of Diderot. Diderot thinks we have to examine things. Diderot thinks we have to weigh arguments. We have to weigh our reasons. And it is very hard to do. And not everyone can do it. And everyone sees things that are important that for others do not seem so important. We have all our own point of view. And notice very nice what he says at the end. Last 3 lines. I love words which soften and moderate the temerity of our propositions. I love this. Personally, I'm like him. In this case, at least. People who come and tell you, this is the truth. I am sure that this is right. I think the best is to always be skeptical of them. Anyone who's so sure, there is a problem. He didn't weigh his reasons. This is why Diderot says, I love words which soften and moderate the temerity, the overcourage of our propositions. He likes it when we say peradventure, which means maybe, perhaps. In no wise. Some people say, methinks it appears to me, right? And the like. So it's a question of education. We continue, next page. And if I had to teach children, I should so train them to answer in this hesitating and undecided manner. What does that mean? I do not understand. Maybe. Is it true that they would have the appearance of apprentices at 60 years of age rather than of doctors at 10, as it is the case at present? I personally put a smiley here. Diderot very often makes me smile. You should always all your life remain a child. You should always all your life wonder. You should always all your life ask questions. You know, we always say of children, they ask too many questions. Diderot is telling us, stay children. Don't take things for granted. Don't take what you know as always a truth. Don't be a doctor at 10, an expert on everything who knows the truth at 10. No. Rather be an apprentice, someone learning, young one, at even 60 years of age. Moderation, a moderate skepticism based on knowledge. This is where Diderot is. "25. What is God?" A question we ask children and that philosophers have much trouble in answering. Right? It's another smiley I put. I let you reflect on this. And I move to 26 with you. Notice what a nice advice he gives us here. People begin to speak to us of God too soon. And another mistake is that his presence is not sufficiently insisted upon. Men have banished God from their company and have hidden him in a sanctuary. The walls of a temple shut him in. He has no existence beyond. Fools that you are, break down these limitations that hamper your ideas. Set God free. See him everywhere as he is everywhere, or say that he is non-existent. An interesting passage that causes reflection. What is Diderot here being? Diderot is being against organized religion. Let's be simple. Diderot is saying you don't have to go to a temple, to a church, to a mosque, etc. You do not have to do that. And in fact, not only you don't have to do that for Diderot, we can agree with him or disagree, of course. It is better not to do that. Look how he describes it. The walls of a temple, any edifice you build for a god, put him in prison, shut him in. He has no existence beyond. So we go to this temple, we do our thing on whatever day of the week, and we leave, and we forget about him. You did your social duty, not your religious work. Okay? So Diderot is saying instead, see God everywhere. And if not, then you're really pretending. If you only think about him when you are in the temple, when you are in a church, a mosque, or anywhere, or a synagogue, or it could be anything, and then when you leave, it's finished. In fact, for Diderot, you don't really believe in him. Okay? This is why he says, see him everywhere, since he is everywhere in all of existence. Otherwise, just say that he doesn't exist and stop lying to yourself. An interesting reflection on the organized religious practice. It's up to you to agree and disagree with Diderot. All right. I think we can end with just the very end of the page. Vigorous minds, so 28, vigorous minds and ardent imaginations, very lively imaginations, do not take kindly, don't like the time skepticism takes, the indolence of skepticism. Skepticism doesn't make an exact decision and says this is the truth. Such minds would rather risk a choice than make none, be deceived and live in doubt. And we end on this note. Some minds, the minds that are not like Diderot, let's be clear, would prefer to just say, I believe whatever you tell me. Even if maybe it's not true, I'll just live and think it's true. Because it's too hard to live in doubt. The indolence of skepticism, this non-movement of skepticism, in fact, it's very hard. Okay? And it doesn't help you with your imagination. Like it doesn't help the pious with his imagination of a God that is fearful, that you can see in your visions and so on. Such excessive pietism, such excessive imagination in it, very ardent imagination, doesn't suit skepticism as Diderot sees it. It doesn't fit, in fact, it doesn't suit, as Diderot sees it, doesn't suit thinking. Okay? It doesn't suit critical thinking. We end here today. I think it's a very nice text by Diderot. We will move on to religion within the limits of reason alone, or of mere reason, next week. Again, we'll take the necessary passages. I think perhaps in one, I'm not sure, probably two classes we will cover it. Meanwhile, you have no homework. Please reflect on these for the final exam rather, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday. Please, I must add that the grade distribution again is 40% for the final exam, 30% for the midterm we did, and then all the homeworks you did will count together the other 30%. Okay. Meanwhile, your exam will be on May 15th, and I believe, to give you the times, you will have 2 hours, You have 2 hours to do your exam, and that will be from 11 to 1 p.m. Okay, and we will do the exam on Moodle. It will be on Moodle quiz. So the exam will be on Moodle. We'll give you the details. In fact, because the Moodle people here have not yet given us all the details, but it will be on Moodle. I'll keep you updated. May 15th from 11 to 1 p.m. So please make sure you are somewhere where you have access to internet. Otherwise, you will not be able to take your exam. And so from today, I'm telling you very early, plan it. Okay? Plan to be somewhere where you actually have access to internet. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you Wednesday.